Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I'm Ben and today I'm filled with foreboding as we head to the beautiful and creepy location of the exclusion zone in the never welcoming but paradoxically alluring environs in and around Pripyat and Chernobyl. Chernobylite, brought to us by the Farm 51 and All In Games, both based near Krakow in Poland, is a new first-person perspective game that mixes a whole host of genres in a radioactive cauldron. What comes out is a mixture of twisted horror and shooting that aspires to lofty heights and only snags a few branches along the way. I was first pulled into the aura of Chernobylite by its setting and how at first glance it evoked similar games of the genre from similar parts of the world. As a fan of the Stalker series and the Metro series, I was intrigued to see what the Farm 51 could bring to the post-Soviet FPS genre. With the Chernobyl disaster back in people's minds after the incredible TV show, and the concept of returning to the exclusion zone hot again with the announcement of Stalker 2, I was very curious to see how Chernobylite would approach the location, the history, and the supernatural in connection with the real-world implications of the disaster. Quickly I realised that Chernobylite was not the game I was expecting, at least not completely. While the environments are undeniably beautiful and captured wonderfully using 3D scanning done in the real world locations, they lack vibrancy and feel very empty as the wind and radioactive clouds blow through them. Yes, you will encounter enemies, of course, but where is the resurgence of mutated wildlife? While having never been to the exclusion zone myself, though I would love to visit, it is not just the flora that have retaken the site of such horror, but also the fauna. That lack of life does lead to a creepy horror vibe, but it doesn't sell the reality of the environment, even though it is utterly gorgeous. What I was expecting from Chernobylite was an open world survival experience. Now, I must admit that expectation was perhaps a little unfair and certainly influenced by my love of previous games from the genre. What you actually get is a much more contained affair. Missions actually take place in a selection of levels around the zone. You may have different objectives in each of these levels, such as to move the story along or to scavenge resources, but the areas are in actuality quite small. What this does do, however, is it helps you grow familiar with them. When you return to them in different weather or lighting, the feelings of stumbling over something familiar is quite pleasant and reassuring, an anchor of calm in a world torn apart by insanity. The main thrust of Chernobylite and the reasons for these missions is your quest as Igor to somehow rescue your lost fiancée. Torn apart years previously, you know there is a chance, however slim, of reuniting with her, and you will stop at nothing to achieve this. This is the impetus for your quest, and the desperation in its seeming futility is what drives your character to extremes. Be it violence, betrayal, or even breaking reality to step through time, Igor and the player are certainly taking on a journey. These story and character moments that accompany them are one of the game's greatest strengths. To achieve this heist-like endgame, you need to prepare. To do this, you must find allies, level up, train, and somewhat oddly build a base. The base building is familiar to anyone who has played a game like Fallout 76, and while a little clunky from the first-person perspective, works well enough. This mechanic ties into the survival elements of the game, scavenging everything you need from food to electronics. You always seem to need mushrooms though. It does it nicely, though it does feel a little tacked onto the experience. At times, Chernobylite does suffer from somewhat of an identity crisis as it tries to implement gritty story and choice-driven narrative with survival, base building and first-person shooting. The experience is certainly not lacking in ambition. And on the shooting front, this is unsurprisingly the main way you physically interact with the game. You are able to craft, pick up and modify a selection of setting appropriate, or at least to start with, weapons. Be it a revolver or an AK-47 or something considerably more exotic, they all handle well, sound believable and behave as you would expect. The game skews the combat to be challenging in keeping with the survival ethos of the experience. Upgrading and modifying your weapons and armor are key to your continued success, especially as the game progresses into the more challenging later levels. It is worth noting without spoiling it that time and choice factor heavily into the story of Chernobylite, and it really does give the entire game a unique feel. The eponymous Chernobylite is actually a mineral born of the disaster that factors heavily into this element of the game. The writing that accompanies this is of a quality I wasn't expecting. It is however hampered quite strikingly what I can only describe as some bold choices when it comes to the English voice acting. Unfortunately, this element can sometimes really pull you out of the experience. Igor certainly feels miscast, as are many of the supporting roles. I would strongly recommend playing Chernobylite using the Russian voice acting and the subtitles, which I know isn't ideal for everyone, but trust me, it's the best way to play it. Chernobylite is somewhat of a mixed bag. The Farm 51 have aimed for the moon with this gutsy mashup of genres set in a place that clearly captivates and intrigues them in the same way it does myself. While the concept is no longer original, with notable franchises clearly marrying the horror and supernatural elements of the Chernobyl disaster, what sets Chernobylite apart from them is the human tale at its core. I found myself relating to and empathizing with Igor's plight, his desperation, and his fraying mind as he slowly loses grip on reality. The zone has a way of messing with them, of making reality porous in ways that trick, deceive, and confuse. More than once I was jumping out of my skin due to a successful jump scare, and often being bombarded with the melancholy of scientific promise turned into scientific hubris. This is a game of choices, good and bad, writ big and small, and I recommend it more for its small quiet moments than its big ambitious swings at genre redefining design. Chernobylite is out now on PC and is coming in September to consoles. Check it out for something a little different and not what you might expect. I've been Ben for Experience Kills. Please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that bell icon. You can also find me on Twitter at DIYE and collectively at Experience Kills. So until next time, be safe out there, especially when you're scavenging for those mushrooms.